Hello you guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Pam and I create makeup videos that help you feel beautiful on the inside and out. So today I am super excited because this is a first part of a series that I'm starting on here called Makeup for Beginners. I just wanted to really crack down to the nitty-gritty of how makeup can be made easy for you. So in today's look, we're going to go over 10 steps that I think help execute the most beautiful, flawless eye makeup. It's really simple, really easy, and hopefully everything I go through makes sense for you. I'm going to link below the brushes and eyeshadow palettes that I recommend today, and I'm also going to list the 10 steps that I think it really takes for you to execute makeup perfectly and flawlessly. So without further ado, let's get into it. So my first important rule when you are trying to define your crease, blend it out, and really create a nice eye makeup look is to pick your prime color. So your prime color is a brown shade that is 1 to 2 shades darker than your natural skin tone, and typically people gravitate towards a shade that is a little bit warmer in tone. So for the sake of today's tutorial and lesson, we are going to go in with the Morphe Jaclyn Hill eyeshadow palette, and I love this palette specifically because it has so many brown neutral shades, and the one that we're going to go in with today to create our crease is going to be this one. So you can see that this one is close to my skin tone. It's just a little bit deeper, but it's a nice neutral base that we can build upon. So the first step is to always pick your prime color and then go from there. A couple of things to keep in mind is to always go for something matte. If you go for something shimmery that has shimmery pigments in it, it's going to bounce light off, and it's actually going to do the exact opposite of creating that depth and dimension. It's going to reflect the light and make it look a little bit more diffused than we really want it. So for the sake of this lesson, we're just going to go in with a matte color. And another thing you need to consider is whether your eyes are actually primed. So for this look today, I just have a little bit of like residual concealer on my eyelid from applying my face makeup, and you can see that there's just a little bit of creasing. So what I'm going to do is actually just take my ring finger and pat out that creasing, and we're going to use a drugstore primer today. So primers are going to grab onto the pigment of the eyeshadow, they're going to intensify the color, and they're going to keep them on the skin longer. So I highly recommend using a primer. There are several in the market, and today we're going to go in with the Wet n Wild Photo Focus eyeshadow primer. This primer right here is really nice because it's creamy, it has just a tiny hint of pigment, but it doesn't overpower the shadow. There are a ton of primers, that's going to be an entirely separate lesson, but just for today we're going to go in with this primer right here. It looks like a little bit of a cream. And make sure that you don't have any creases on your eyelid. Take your ring finger because it applies the least amount of pressure, and you're just going to pat that onto the eyelids. You could use a brush to shear this out as well. I'm really keeping the primer right up on top of the crease bone. I'm not taking it up to the brow. You can if you want, but I'm not really putting a ton of shadow there, so I'm just focusing the primer right where I'm going to be placing the shadow. All right, so now let's get on to step number 2. For this step, it is important for you to identify the geographical regions of your eye. So with your eye, you're going to have a brow bone, which is right here, the bone that's closest to the eyebrow. You're gonna have a crease bone, which is where your eye actually bends back into. You're gonna have an eyelid, and your eyelid is actually just this part that's closest to the lash line, or right before it meets the crease. So your eyelid is this part right here. Your outer corner is this part all the way through here, which frames your outer eye area, and then your inner corner is this inner tear duct right here. So the eye has segments, and today what we are just focusing on for this very specific and in-depth eyeshadow tutorial is just to identify your crease bone, blend that out, apply shadows there, and really build the foundation of your eye look. Whether it's a hooded eye, which just means that this brow bone is a little bit heavier and kind of hides where that eye folds, or you have a really defined eye crease with a lot of eyelid space. It doesn't matter. You really need to identify the crease. That is the most important step in your eyeshadow routine. What you're going to do is place your finger right where your eye bends, and for me, with my eye shape, I actually don't have a super defined crease. So when I apply shadow, I actually go a little bit above where my eye bends. You can actually tilt your head back too and see where that is, and place your finger there, and I'm actually going to take my shadow just a tiny bit higher. So identify your crease, that's step number 2. And now you're going to identify which brush you're going to use, which is step number 3. So these are a couple of examples of eyeshadow brushes that are really great for the crease. I'm going to go through why each one of these works, and then I'm going to show you brushes that don't work. So for this, you are going to go in with a brush like this. This is a Morphe M441 brush, and the reason why this is ideal is because it is tapered. So it comes to a point, and tapered just means that it is wide and then comes to a point. So this brush is tapered. It has a rounded edge, and you want a rounded brush. You don't want a really square brush or a super pointy brush because you want this to mimic the bone structure. Our bone is rounded, and so a rounded brush for that socket is going to be ideal. It is super fluffy, but it's not overly large. So when you are creating your crease and putting down eyeshadow, you want to be mindful of the distribution of color. We're going to get into that. It's going to make a lot more sense once I actually get into the tutorial portion, but the reason why you want to use this brush is because it's not too big and it's not too small. So other examples of really good crease brushes aside from the Morphe one is is this one, which actually is still tapered, but it comes to a little bit more of a point. So the pointier the brush, more detail you're going to be able to create. You always want to keep that in mind. This one's really great as well because it's super fluffy and soft. It's not as tapered. It doesn't come to such an obvious point, but it does still offer a taper. This one I actually really like as well because it is a little bit flatter, but it's still tapered. So flatter brushes create a little bit more precision. So this is kind of the best of both worlds because it's flat and it creates precision, but then it comes to a point so you still get that beautiful fluffy blended out crease. And then lastly, this is a Sigma E40 and I just love this brush. As you can see, it's not overly tapered, but it does have a nice rounded edge and it is smaller and concentrated. So you are gonna create nice, beautiful detail with this, and Sigma brushes are great quality. Okay, a couple of brushes that do not work are brushes like this. This is a Morphe M203 brush. So this is a flat dome-shaped brush, and as you can see from the side angle, it's very narrow in width. It has a nice rounded edge right here. So this brush is an amazing brush. This is really nice for patting and packing shadow. This is not ideal for creating a nice rounded blended out crease, right? This brush is also something that you want to stay away from when you are building up your crease color or your initial first transition shade, and this is the Morphe M506 brush. The reason why you don't want to really use a brush like this is because it comes to such a point and it's so small and it's so compact. You can see the fibers are really densely packed in there. This is going to be more for detail work. So brushes like this are going to apply eyeshadow onto your eye in a very concentrated manner and a very precise manner. This is going to be better for the outer corner, really fitting into small little nooks and crannies on the eye, but this is not going to be ideal for really building out a nice crease. All right, and the last brush or brush type you want to stay away from is this brush right here. This is just a random brush that I got from Amazon, but I see a lot of brushes like this on the market, so I wanted to address why you should not use this for your crease. So first of all, it's duo fibered, which duo fibered brushes have their place in your makeup routine, but I personally just like them for the face or for correcting errors with eyeshadow. I don't like these for the initial application of an eyeshadow. This duo fibered brush is supposed to have the black fibers that pack on the powder and the white fibers that blend it out, but we don't want the packing blending combo with our initial layer. We want to go in with something really nice and fluffy like this to first apply the product. If we feel like at the end we can go in and tweak and make some adjustments, then that's when this brush comes in. But for your first initial crease application, I would avoid brushes like this. Okay, so our point number 4 is whether to go with a larger versus smaller brush. So here we have all the brushes that we said were appropriate for our crease. These are going to be a little bit larger, and the larger the brush, the more eyeshadow you're going to apply, but that is not always a good thing. You don't always want to apply a ton of eyeshadow at one time and then try to go back and blend it out and soften it up. You rather apply a smaller amount and then add to it. So we're going to eliminate our larger brushes like this, and we're gonna just kind of debate between whether we want to use these brushes right here. So for the sake of this tutorial, I'm gonna go in with this one right here. It's a Morphe M441 brush, and we're gonna use this to define our crease and apply our initial eyeshadow layer or our transition color. So without any product on, you want to just kind of place that in your crease and actually see if that does anatomically fit in your eye socket. So you're gonna place it in your crease, look down, and then open up. If the brush hits a little bit onto the lower lid and a little bit onto the brow bone, that's a good brush. Just for demonstration purposes, I'm gonna actually take a really small brush, I'm gonna place this in my crease and then look up. This smaller brush doesn't really touch my brow bone and doesn't really touch my lower lid area, so we know that a brush like this is too small. All right, so we know this is the brush for us because if it's in our crease, it touches the brow bone, touches the lower lid, and now we're ready to start our eyeshadow application process. So we're gonna take our brush and we're gonna swirl the product, okay? You don't really wanna pat and drag, you just wanna swirl, get your brush head evenly coated with eyeshadow. So it should look like this right here. Now, something I always do, always, whether I'm doing makeup on someone else or myself, is tap off the excess. So you can almost see it's second nature for me. The moment I swirl eyeshadow, I have to tap off the excess. You can do this on your hand, just like this, by hitting the brush against your hand, and you can see the excess powder fly off. You can do this like this, which is just like a quick flicking motion that I do and it flicks off powder, or you can actually tap it onto your skin and take off some of that shadow. A lot of professional makeup artists do this, and that really just ensures that you are having the appropriate amount of eyeshadow being deposited onto the eye without having a ton of excess. If you don't flick off your eyeshadow and you just apply the eyeshadow straight onto your eye, what you're gonna do is have a lot of excessive particles fly everywhere. It's gonna get in areas that you don't necessarily want this brown shadow to go, like maybe the inner corner or all over the face if you've got your face makeup on, and it's just gonna create a mess. It's gonna really ruin your looks. You always wanna make sure you tap off the excess. Now you're gonna go in and you're gonna place your crease color. But before we even put eyeshadow onto our lid, I wanna talk about how to hold the brush. So how you hold your eyeshadow brush is at the tail end, just like this, very loosely. You kind of want it to almost be falling out of your hand. You don't want to overly grip. If you grip your brush too hard, you're going to actually apply too much pressure onto your eye and you're going to have a really blotchy eyeshadow application. So hold your brush at the end, and you're really just going to want to hold it in your fingers just like this, to where you can easily move it between your middle finger and your index finger. You want to place your crease color, find your pupil and then go 45 degrees from that, and place your crease color right there. Okay, so the reason I highly recommend holding your brush at the tail end is because it controls the amount of pressure that you apply. And that brings me to point 7, which is wherever you put your brush down first is going to be the point of most saturation. So if I put my brush down right in the middle, that's going to be the darkest, most concentrated point. Everything is going to diffuse from that angle. So it's really important that you know where you want to put your eyeshadow color and then blend from there. So for me, like I said, I identify my pupil 45 degrees from that, and I want to place my eyeshadow right here. So that's where most of the eyeshadow is going to be deposited because that's the exact spot that I've chosen to put my brush down first. All right, so let's actually apply some eyeshadow. We're going to take our eyeshadow, swirl, and tap off the excess. And now we're going to find our pupil, go 45 degrees from that, and hold our brush at the tail end. What you're going to do is apply in mini circular motions. So all I'm going to do is just stop right here. I'm going to place it right where I want it and then just do tiny little circles and stop. So now you want to stop and take a look at your eyeshadow, and once you've got a color on, all of a sudden all of the margins start to make sense. So that's point number 8. You want to start to establish your borders and your boundaries. So I use a triangle method where I kind of take a triangle and I go from the outer corner up to the brow. Okay, I drag it down the side of the nose, and then I take this color underneath the eye because I'm going to smoke up my lash line, and then complete the triangle. So it's kind of a softer triangle, but it really does help me define my boundaries and let me know that now once I've got my triangle drawn, I'm just gonna buff along that triangle. Some people don't do this, some people find that confusing, but the thing is, if I'm just buffing aimlessly, I don't really know if I should just be going straight across this way, if I should be going up to the brow, if I should stop when I get to the brow, if I don't need to take it back out towards this outer brow area. So that's why I do preach the triangle method, and I'm going to link below to a TikTok demonstrating exactly how I teach that in 30 seconds, and that'll help you out as well. But now that we've got our point of concentration identified, I'm just going to drag triangle from here to the brow, down the side of the nose, underneath the eye, and those are my borders. That's my boundaries, and now I know just to buff along that triangle. So point number 9, I am only moving my fingers. My wrist is stationary. My wrist is not clenched. I'm not overly tight when I'm holding the brush. My wrist is stationary, and I'm only moving the brushes in tiny little circular motions, just like this. So I'm just like going in tiny little circles up to the brow, tiny little circles down the bridge of the nose, tiny little circles underneath the eye, tiny little circles to this outer corner, and we're just blending. So that's our initial application, our first layer, and we can see that the crease is defined. We can now see and identify an obvious brow bone, a crease, a lid, an inner and outer corner. My last step is step number 10, and it's to identify the areas that you need to blend out your eyeshadow, which is to basically diffuse a color to make it look soft. And you want to pack on eyeshadow, which is to make a color look very concentrated and very obvious in an area. So when I blend out my crease, I'm diffusing color from a concentrated point out both directions. For the lid though, I don't want to diffuse color on the lid as much. I want it to be a little bit more packed and concentrated because that's going to define the borders and define the segments and make the lid have an obvious distinction from the crease. So I wanted to go back to the brush that I mentioned earlier, which is this one right here. This is going to be ideal for packing on a vanilla color right here. So for the sake of this tutorial, we're going to go back into the Morphe Jaclyn Hill palette. Let's grab this color right here, swipe, tap off the excess, and now that we have a pretty obvious like lid area identified, we're just going to take this brush and pack. I'm going to pack that onto the lid, kind of creating almost like a half circle right here. And I'm once again holding the brush at the tail end, only using my fingers to move, and my wrist is stationary and my grip is light. Get that brush on there. So now you have a lid color and a crease color. But the final step, because you're not done here, is to go back in with your crease color and in mini buffing motions over the crease one more time. You're going to blend again, because you do want to blend or diffuse the line where that lid color stops. But where the lid color starts, you want it to be concentrated. So I'm going to keep my brush here. We want everywhere where this brush is to be concentrated, but we want everywhere where that color ends to be diffused. So you want a line of concentration to fade into a crease that's blended out. I'm going to do this eye now. Now that we've got our crease defined and our lid color, this is a good stopping point. You can stop here if you want. You can do your mascara and lashes and you're done. I'm going to do the rest of my eye makeup off camera because today's lesson was only on the crease color and how it works in tandem with the lid color, mainly how to blend out your crease, like eyeshadow 101. This is makeup made easy, and I'm going to finish off the rest of the face and I will get back with you guys whenever I'm done. All right, you guys, that concludes this makeup lesson. This is the first part of a series that I'm doing on here that I'm super excited about. Makeup for beginners is something that I'm very passionate about because I feel like there are a lot of tutorials out there, but there are not that many that actually break down the nitty-gritty of what it takes to execute a makeup look. there are many different learning styles that work for different people, and so hopefully if this type of method is beneficial for you, then you gain something from this. Other than that, follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and I will catch up with you guys later. Bye.